Hello everyone, Jakub here. I'll admit that the last few months of my life have been a somewhat crazy ride. Sorry for being absent from YouTube and for that matter LinkedIn too, but there have been a lot of things happening. My last upload was in January, and since then I've changed my job, which effectively means that I'm back in the game dev industry as a marketing project manager at Community Villa. Aside from this happening, I also started dieting, got a coronavirus which I'm battling now, but I'm doing rather well, been on vacation and got forced to, and ultimately managed to strongly develop my soft and leadership skills. Currently it's 37 degrees outside, the hottest I've ever experienced in Poland. My fiancée has temporarily gone to her family's house, and I'm under self-imposed isolation, recovering from the Rona, having only the cat as my companion at the moment. I haven't written anything for the blog, my LinkedIn profile or the channel in a while, but I happen to have a few articles laying in my backlog, and I'm going to adapt them into YouTube videos and blog posts, so I'll be talking about things that aren't current but still are interesting and touch the sphere of game development, business, marketing and such. Hopefully I'll return to frequent writing and uploading. I'll most likely also provide a continuation for the esports series before writing and recording something wholly new. But yeah, without further ado, Leffen, one of the most prominent Super Smash Bros. Melee and Guilty Gear Strive players in the world, published a string of tweets a couple of months ago, right around the time when King of Fighters 15 was being released, and they are as follows. One of my most hated things with being a fighting games player is how incredibly quickly almost every game dies, or rather loses 95% of its players within 6 months. Feels like as soon as a game comes out, it's already started its rapid downwards descent. It makes it hard to justify playing games like CoF 15 to me that had I had a bad initial experience with netcode, PC port, etc. With how long companies take to fix basic issues, provide basic updates like newsfeed, and the insane cost of entry to these games, it's no wonder people stop. And once the game starts its insanely quick fall off, the price becomes even worse. Why would a normal person buy a fighting game for $60 when there is 300 players left, and most of those are now way better than they will ever be and have been playing since day one? I really hope the next gen fighting games go towards free-to-play or cheap entry options. There is very few competitive multiplayer games these days that are full price entry. People freaking manage to get through the slow ass Final Fantasy XIV Realm Reborn in 2022 because it's free. What more proof do you need? As I've been through a couple of releases of fighting games as an active player, I couldn't help but kind of agree with these statements. I knew that instinctually, but needed some sort of confirmation. Here is the first graph showing the popularity of some fighting games over time. As we can see, they all have a more or less decent start and very quickly fall off after their release. Let's do some quick maths. Guilty Gear Strive had 30,939 players on the 31st day of May during its release, and it was the most players the game has ever had. 4 weeks later, on June 28th, the game had 11,019 players. It means that the retention rate in this 28 days long span clocked in at 35.62%. This is not great, but also not extremely bad. I mean, it wouldn't be bad if not a design choice that pretty much all fighting games abide by. When it comes to the claim that 95% of players from the peak don't play the game anymore after half a year, this is probably a somewhat accurate claim. R180 at 5% is a very optimistic estimate, I'd even say. People don't often play fighting games by themselves. There are of course ones who like to practice a single combo for 3 hours daily in the training mode, but they don't seem to be a huge part of the overall number of buyers, as they are the most hardcore of the hardcore players. This means that people who play fighting games do so pretty much exclusively for the multiplayer capabilities. There are two ways that we can go now. One doesn't affect the game's multiplayer capabilities, and the other will provide a steady flow of new players. Of course, the combination of both would be the best, but at least one of these methods works and is proven. The first one is to make a lengthy and compelling single-player campaign. This way, people will care not only about mixing up their friends, but also about characters and their actions. As it's a gameplay and game design oriented matter, I won't be discussing it here as I lack expertise in this area. However, I mentioned this case because single player games are often pretty compelling to play, and fighting games often lack a nice story to tell. Maybe Mortal Kombat and Soul Calibur could be counted as games with a worthwhile single player component, but these stories, let's be honest, are far from stellar. You could make something captivating and adapt it into a fighting game somehow, I suppose. Of course, there are multiple other single player modes to explore, like missions, challenges, combo trials, versus modes and so on, and they should at least be considered at some point in the development cycle. I don't really see this becoming the case. Fighting games at their core are all about confronting another person. While it is possible that there is a market for a single-player oriented fighting game, it is also possible that there is none. Market research could be done and conducted, but if people still haven't tried that, or they didn't fail and we don't know about it, I reckon this wouldn't be a worthwhile effort. The second thing is way more interesting, and it lies in the realm of my expertise. Namely, Leffen mentioned the free-to-play model as a viable alternative to the current most popular distribution model of fighting games, pay-to-play. There are a couple of enticing characteristics of this proposition, and we'll talk about them now. Leffen mentions that people are usually more willing to check out and consequently play free games. This is often due to microeconomics and psychology. Goods and services in the market aren't perfectly available, but this means that there are some obstacles when it comes to acquiring said goods. Goods by definition are scarce. Things that aren't scarce, like the gravity, aren't market goods. Need to be an object of an exchange, a purchase for example, and there is usually some sort of cost that needs to be covered. This and a bit more applies to games as well. Let's say that I'd like to buy a physical copy of Elden Ring for PS5. They are scarce, as the number of physical copies is limited. They cost an amount of money, and they also need to fulfill a couple of other requirements to play the game. I need to have the PS5 and so on. These requirements that keep me from getting and using the product are called entry barriers. The fewer entry barriers there are, the easier it is to obtain the product and use it. In the free-to-play model, we eliminate, at least on the surface level, one of the biggest barriers: the monetary price to pay. Lesser barriers of entry translate to two important things. People, at least in theory, will be more likely to try your game, as it costs them only a bit of time and storage space to give it a shot. This means that the cost of a single conversion, in this case, downloads of the game, should be significantly lower than in the pay-to-play model. And because of this, if you're able to continuously conduct user acquisition campaigns, and in a broader sense, ensure that there is a stream of new players who will join and remain within the game, you're on a good way to build a very healthy community. What do I mean by a healthy community? There are two aspects to that. the casual one from the player's point of view and the professional, dev-oriented one. In the casual sense, a healthy community means that there are always people who will be more or less on the same skill level as you. You'll have a possibility to learn the game by playing others, and your skill level will grow. You will be able to face better players over time, as you will become a stronger competitor. You will also become acquainted with the mechanics and playstyles of different people and characters. After all, Leo in Guilty Gear Strive can be played in a couple of ways, and he is just one character. In the professional sense, it means that there are enough players on each skill level to play different people and learn the gameplay. We need to consider retention rates though. After all, not all people who download your game will stick to playing it. Because of this, you need a stream of new users who will be able to replace the one who went away and expand the community even more. For this, you need to conduct user acquisition campaigns, and you need to keep your players engaged, perhaps by adding new content often or by conducting events. There is already a fighting game behemoth people in the community are overlooking, but it's free to play and it's the biggest fighting game on PC. Brawlhalla. This is an interesting title, as it's not a traditional fighting game like Street Fighter or Tekken, for it's a brawler, a platform fighter in which your objective is to slam your opponent out of the boundaries of the stage. A lot of people don't think this is a fighting game, but we won't be gatekeeping anything here. It's a game, you fight others, so for this video, the market and the industry, it's a fighting game. Here is a graph that is showing how the game has been doing since its beginning. For about a year and a half it wasn't big, rarely reaching on average more than 1,000 daily active users, that's DAU per month, but it popped off in November 2015, surpassing on average 7,000 daily active users per month and never dropping below that number. This was a result of starting an open beta, for which there must have been both a big community built and a ton of other marketing activities done to reach such levels. Brawlhalla, despite being on the market for almost 8 years so far, still shows a growing trend, and through multiple interesting business development opportunities that have stuck, we have seen some great brand collaborations that allowed us to play, for example, Lara Croft or Shovel Knight. Brawlhalla, even though it's rather limited in its technical aspect, runs well, has a good netcode, and isn't inherently pay to win. However, I recall the time when everyone played Wu Shang out of necessity, as he was the best character in the game. The game relies on selling permanent access to heroes, there are usually some free heroes in a rotation, and vanity items, and it's doing better than any other fighting game on PC, at least. When it comes to more traditional fighting games, there are no significant free-to-play games at the moment. Fightskate doesn't count. But we'll see a big one in the future. Riot Games are working on Project L, a 2D fighting League of Legends spin-off. Some devs have already confirmed that the game will have some sort of a viable form of a free-to-play experience. The devs behind the game used to have a free-to-play fighting game called Rising Thunder. It folded back in 2015, and I believe it is no coincidence that Riot decided to acquire this particular team to work on their game. I've never liked LOL, never been a fan of Riot Games, yet I can't help but keep my fingers crossed for Project L. There is also one more thing that may explain why some companies tend to not try and explore free-to-play possibilities. They are just adjusted and used to running their products in a specific way. Having, say, Tekken 8 as a free-to-play title would mean that the dev team behind the game would need to be strongly restructured. New people who know how to earn on such titles would need to be hired, and so on. They would even have to get UI and UX designers who would be better suited to design the interface and menus to optimize retention rates and encourage more spending. This is a move that is very risky and possibly very costly once you have an established IP and an experienced team. Companies simply don't want to take such risks, or don't want to do something that is against their DNA. Can we blame them for sticking to what they know best? In conclusion, Leffen has a fair point regarding the fighting games market, and there is already a strong case that supports his convictions. Brawlhalla. We'll see how Project L will fare on the market, as it has the team and backing that can make it work. It's also not a surprise that some studios don't want to explore the free-to-play capabilities, as it would be a risky and disruptive move for them. We can keep our fingers crossed for someone to take the risky but potentially worthwhile plunge into this niche of the market. Okay, thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I would also like to invite you to add me on LinkedIn and to follow me on Twitter. Sorry for sounding rather terribly, but yeah, I do have the Rona still, and even though recording this clip was not really an easy task, as I had a couple of let's say wheezing coughs, I really enjoyed it, and I'm glad that I finally have found some time to do that, and I hope that I will be able to do more of these in the future. Yeah, so thanks for watching. Cheers.